LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 27th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 23 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really interesting show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Actually, all of my clips come from those corporate outlets. Almost all of them come from the Sunday morning news analysis shows. No technical political comedy this week because no Saturday Night Live, no Real Time with Bill Maher till January 15th and 16th. Those shows will come back. But this week I am going to start off with a couple clips from Stephen Colbert, who was actually a guest on CBS's Face the Nation. And I'll have him talking about mostly about the Republican side of the field, and that is going to be the first topic that I'll cover is the Republican side of the 2016 presidential campaign. Then I'll have a couple transitional clips about the 2016 campaign in general before I get to a smaller number of clips on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential campaign, although Bernie Sanders did 2 interviews this morning, so I have several Bernie Sanders clips sprinkled throughout all 3 of my topics. And then the third topic, if you don't count the transitional topic, is the issue of race and police, and that's an issue that's come up again and again, and it came up again this weekend with this shooting in Chicago that at least one of the victims of the police shooting turned out to be entirely innocent, and then the other person looks like it might have been excessive force, and I'm going to play a couple clips on that, and then a clip of Spike Lee, and also a clip of Bernie Sanders talking about the general Black Lives Matter movement, and black on black crime is what Spike Lee's going to talk about. So those are the topics I'm going to cover. If you want to follow along with my clip list, I've also put a link down in the video description to the clip list I use of all 23 clips. There's actually one small mistake on clip 7 is actually going to come right before clip 15, and all the other clips will then move up a spot because I ordered it incorrectly, but I'll point that out when I get to that point or when I get to the clip list there. And anyway, so like I said, I want to start off with a couple clips of Stephen Colbert talking about the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. And one, I think the best and most interesting part of that interview, and there were a lot of interesting parts to that interview, and I suggest if you want to see the whole thing, go down to Face the Nation. The link I have down to the entire Face the Nation program down in the video description. But here's my favorite clip of Stephen Colbert this morning, comparing his Colbert character on Comedy Central to Donald Trump over in this clip.
Facts?
Facts and their salience in the conversation.
I'm a big fan of facts. I'm not sure they have any bearing on what person's popularity is, because Donald Trump is like, I'm not the first person to say this, but I completely agree that he's my old character with $10 billion. You know, he's completely playing on an emotional level, and so beautifully. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I just can't do that old character anymore, because he's doing it better than I ever could, because he's willing to drink his own Kool-Aid and manufacture it and distribute it, because he's got all the cash. He's this very interesting, like Frankenstein of the idea that facts don't matter and only money does. Because if money is speech, he's got a $10 billion mouth. And it doesn't have to spend any of it, because everyone will point a camera at him.
Before you started the show, you said...
So that was my favorite clip of the interview with Stephen Colbert, and I also liked his more general analysis of the Trump phenomenon, and actually he said something nice about Donald Trump after John Dickerson on Face the Nation asked Stephen Colbert to give his theory of the 2016 election, and he also talked about the way he feels bad about some of the glee he takes in the dropouts from the race over here.
Theory of this election, do you have one?
Anything goes, I guess. All bets are off. There's a populism to Trump that I find very appealing. And it's only this, is that the party elders would like him to go away. But the people have decided that he's not going to.
So you like that?
Yeah, I may disagree with anything that he's saying and think that his proposals are a little, well, more than a little shocking. But there is something really hopeful about the fact that, well, 36% of the likely voters want him, so the people in the machine don't get to say otherwise. That's the one saving grace, I think, of his candidacy.
You have to look at this mess of an election and like make something of it, make a joke of it, come to terms with it. Like, how would you?
I always feel bad. I feel bad for the candidates now, you know, because what did we start off with? Something like 22 at one point?
We're still in
That's
high
why we
double
did Hungry for Power games, because we were trying to think of how do we talk about them, because most of them we know are just going to fall by the wayside. You know, if not literally with an arrow in their chest, but it was certainly massive, you know, campaign debt. You know, God knows what's going to happen to George Pataki. He's going to be swept into the turbines of this election, you know, or tossed over a railing into a pit full of piranhas. Something, you know, bad is going to happen to all the lower tier candidates. And I started feeling bad about how excited I was about each of them dropping out.
What's your view about the fact?
So, I don't know. I guess that shows Stephen Colbert kind of has a heart more than you would have known from the character he played on Comedy Central, that he actually feels bad about the glee he feels of the way that some of those candidates are going to get treated by the buzzsaw of the 2016 presidential campaign. But as you can tell from the main topic of those two introductory clips being Donald Trump, in a lot of ways, this was the year of Donald Trump. Donald Trump kind of, if you've been watching my clip roundups for the last several months, ever since he announced, what was it, in June, he has dominated the news and dominated the Republican side of the 2016 field for the presidential campaign. And I'm going to start off with sort of an extended discussion of Donald Trump that includes several Donald Trump interview clips. This is the only Donald Trump interview that was on the Sunday morning news programs. It's from ABC's This Week, guest hosted by their reporter Jonathan Karl. And Jonathan Karl both put together this report and then interviewed Donald Trump before a rally in Michigan on a bunch of topics. And one of the things near the end of this, you'll see they talk about some of the vulgar comments he made about Hillary Clinton this last week. And two of the three networks that showed this clip this morning actually bleeped the the vulgar Yiddish word that he used, although one of them didn't. So I'll play that for you in a couple clips. But first, this report is about 7 minutes long. I think in general, it's a really good synopsis of the year of Donald Trump, which is why I'm playing such an extended clip. And I'll discuss it a little more after you watch that report from ABC this morning here.
We can't blame you, but while most of the candidates have been quiet, Donald Trump used the holiday to go on a Twitter tirade against rivals on both sides, tweeting, "Remember when failed candidate Jeb Bush said that illegals came across the border as an act of love? He spent $59 million and is at 3%. And overnight, tweeting, "Hillary Clinton has announced that she is letting her husband out to campaign, but he's demonstrated a penchant for sexism. So inappropriate." I've been covering Trump's presidential ambitions from the start, all the way back to 2013, when no one thought he would actually run. And this morning, a look at the year of Trump. Our roundtable is standing by with their insights, and we'll even ask a Supreme Court justice what he thinks of Trump's proposals. But first, we went on the trail this week for an exclusive interview with the man who has transformed the race for the White House.
We are going to make America great again. I love you. I love you. Thank you.
As a presidential candidate, Donald Trump turned the Republican primary into a blockbuster.
I will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. I tell you that.
We caught up with Trump this week before a rally in Michigan to talk about the year that was.
When you first got in, you were kind of dismissed. People said maybe you'll be a flash in the pan. But did you, even you, think that you would dominate the field the way you've had?
Not to this extent, John, and not this quickly. I mean, really, it's very quick. I mean, we're doing so amazingly well, and we have such a big lead, and I want to keep the lead, because ultimately, what difference does it make if you're not going to keep the lead? But, it's a very strong domination, and it's a very, very big lead. So I didn't think that we would have that. I expected to win, otherwise we wouldn't be running. I like to win.
You thought you would win the nomination?
I thought I would win. I thought I had a very good chance.
In fact, we were there with Trump for his first foray into Iowa more than 2 years ago, when almost no one believed he would actually run.
You're not really thinking about running for president, are you?
It's far too early. You have a long time to go.
Could you be taken seriously as a presidential candidate?
I know that I built a great company with a tremendous net worth and beaten a lot of people that are very smart, and that's really what the country needs. It's a company like this country should look.
When we met with him a year later in Washington, a Trump presidential run still seemed highly unlikely.
You're not thinking about running for president, are you?
Well, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to give it very serious consideration.
Are you really?
That I can tell you.
Never
We're going to see what
serious?
happens. We may surprise you.
Yeah.
You would be surprised, right?
I would be shocked.
Fast forward to this summer, an announcement like a Hollywood premiere, including a dramatic entrance by escalator.
Well, you need somebody, because politicians are all talk, no action. Nothing's going to get done. They will not bring us, believe me, to the promised land.
Trump has cast himself as an action hero in an epic battle against career politicians and those deep-pocket donors who pay for access.
So is that what you've tapped into? Is that the appeal? People think that politics has gotten all corrupt. It's the money interest.
Oh, politics is corrupt, and I think people know that. I think that if it's not actually corrupt as a definition of corrupt, it's certainly influenced by a lot of bad forces. When you look at some of the deals that we make with these countries and with companies and with other places and other people, they're not that stupid. The reason they're doing those deals is because of special interests, lobbyists, people like that, where they give millions and millions of dollars to candidates. And John, they're making them because these candidates are controlled 100% by the people that give the money.
He sometimes cast his own party as an enemy, refusing for a while to rule out running as an independent before finally pledging allegiance to the GOP. He hasn't held back since day one of his campaign, launching a series of insults, first at Mexican immigrants, then John McCain and POWs, then women. But it was his call for a temporary ban of all Muslims that sparked the harshest condemnation. Leaders from both parties calling him racist and downright dangerous, even un-American.
What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for, and more importantly, it's not what this country stands for.
President Obama did an interview where he said you were exploiting those angers and fears of people that have been left behind by the economy.
People are angry. They are angry. I'm not tapping into the anger, and some people have said I'm doing that, and certainly I'm not doing it intentionally. I just know it can be turned around. It can be turned around quickly. But I'll tell you what, if you have another 4 years of like a Hillary, of that kind of mentality and thinking, we're not going to have a country left.
And Trump ended the year the way he started it, drawing fire for using a crude sexual term to describe how Hillary Clinton lost to Barack Obama in 2008.
She was going to beat Obama. She was favored to win, and she lost. She lost.
But with each controversy, Trump's ratings have only gone higher. Debate viewership shattering records, 20+ million watching, rising poll numbers, magazine covers, and hosting SNL.
I don't have to get specific. With me, it's just works, it's magic.
This week, PolitiFact gave Trump's campaign misstatements its Lie of the Year award, saying they couldn't pick just one. But controversial statements and false claims that would typically disqualify a nominee, like saying thousands celebrated in New Jersey on 9/11, haven't made viewers tune out.
I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either.
And though many rivals wrote him off as just a summer stunt, they've been forced to take him on, often at their own peril.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is
real tough.
You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
After first laughing him off, the Democratic field is now aiming their fire at Trump, as they did during last week's New Hampshire debate.
Donald Trump. Bringing Donald Trump back into it.
Trump insists he'll do even better against Clinton than he is against the Republicans.
I'm winning, I'm beating everybody. And in my opinion, beating Hillary is easier than beating these people.
Since the Trump show began, he's maintained a double-digit lead over the GOP field in every ABC News Washington Post poll, more than 5 months on top. But now Senator Ted Cruz is polling neck and neck with Trump in Iowa. Could the man who thrives on being the winner handle a loss in the state that votes first? We asked him about Cruz before he headed into his jam-packed rally in Michigan.
The guy that's giving you the toughest time now is Ted Cruz. And you've given him a pass so far.
He's not giving me a tough time. He's a very nice guy. He's been very respectful. He's backed me in every position. Hear those people?
Yeah.
I have to go get them.
The biggest question now, can Trump turn all these supporters he captured in 2015 into votes in 2016? We'll all be tuning in.
We turn out.
So, like I said, I think that Jonathan Karl report was really good. It put the whole Trump phenomenon in context, even going back over the last few years and Trump's previous, faux runs for presidency where he pulled out or where it didn't seem like he was running before he actually surprised everyone and said he was going to run. And I think it covered several of the topics. I thought it was a little bit light on the racism in the Republican Party and the xenophobia and all those nasty things that the Trump phenomenon has really shown a light on. And but if that would be my only criticism of that report, I think overall it did a pretty good job of, like I said, reporting on the Trump phenomenon and also putting it in context there. One thing I thought was kind of funny from that report was the way they covered this vulgar comment Donald Trump made this last week about how Hillary Clinton got schlonged by Barack Obama in the 2008 election and supposedly that means that she lost really badly. Of course, schlong is a Yiddish word for penis, which anyone who grew up in New York or comes from New York, I was actually born in New York, so I would put myself in that category, or I think just most Americans know what that word means, but I think it actually sounds worse when you bleep it out there like they did on ABC. Although I saw Fox News do it this morning before I watched ABC, and I thought it was just going to be Fox News that bleeped it out, and I was going to make fun of Fox News for doing it, but I guess ABC did it, so I have to make fun of both of them. When you watch it, this is a much shorter clip where they just show Donald Trump making the vulgar comment and then Hillary Clinton's sort of indirect response to it. And when you watch it in this shorter clip, it reminds me of that those videos, what they're called, unnecessary censorship, where they put in bleeps that make things sound like people are using profanity when they're really not. And it almost sounds like that to me. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section after you watch that from Fox News Sunday this morning, guest hosted by Doug McKelway in this clip.
She was going to beat Obama. I don't know who'd be worse. I don't know. How does it get worse? But she was going to beat, she was favored to win, and she lost.
You are looking at somebody who's had a lot of terrible things said about me. That's why it's important to stand up to bullies wherever they are, and why we shouldn't let anybody bully his way into the presidency. Because that is not who we are as Americans.
Hillary Clinton reacting to some crude language by Donald Trump earlier this week as he commented on her first run for the White House. And it's time now for our Sunday.
So, yeah, I thought that was kind of silly. I thought it was silly when ABC did it as well. It makes it sound worse than it really was. And the one program that did show the unedited, shocking clip of Donald Trump actually saying what he said was NBC's Meet the Press, which was guest hosted by Andrea Mitchell. Although Chuck Todd did do this interview of Spike Lee that I'm going to show a clip from a little later. But here's Andrea Mitchell asking Bernie Sanders about what Donald Trump said about Hillary Clinton. And this is one of several Bernie Sanders clips I'll be showing during the show. Some under the category of the Democratic side of the race. But I think I have a couple that are responses to Donald Trump. So I put them in this topic. And I think I have one at the end on the issue of race. But anyway, here's Bernie Sanders responding to an unedited, shocking clip of Donald Trump saying Hillary Clinton got schlonged by Obama in 2008 over here.
Peace and goodwill from Trump as he used a vulgar term to refer to Hillary Clinton's 2008 defeat to Barack Obama and criticized her for taking a bathroom break during last weekend's Democratic debate.
She got schlonged. I know where she went. It's disgusting. I don't want to talk about it.
Clinton hit back, accusing Trump of using degrading and sexist language.
Nothing really surprises me anymore. I don't know that he has any boundaries at all. And his bigotry, his bluster, his bullying have become his campaign.
My next guest, Bernie Sanders, responded with humor.
I gotta be honest with you, gotta lay it out on the table. I also went to the bathroom.
Sanders has shown surprising strength in the early voting states and in some
So yeah, that was just actually a clip of Bernie Sanders before the interview on NBC's Meet the Press. But I thought that was kind of funny, the joke he made that he actually went to the bathroom. And I don't know what Donald Trump's problem is with Hillary Clinton going to the bathroom and why that's so disgusting. And I really don't understand why this has become an actual topic in the 2016 presidential campaign. But it's been a surprising campaign, I guess. And the next clip I want to show is actually from Andrea Mitchell's interview of Bernie Sanders, where Senator Bernie Sanders answers a question about Donald Trump tweet. This is kind of similar. This is where Donald Trump, well, you'll see the tweet, but it's basically saying that Bill Clinton is going to start campaigning for Hillary Clinton, but he's known to be a sexist, how inappropriate, or something like that. And it kind of reminds me of the clip I uploaded earlier in the week where Don Lemon cut off this conservative commentator who was blaming Hillary Clinton for the misdeeds of her husband, Bill. You can go look at that if you're interested over on my YouTube channel. But here's Andrea Mitchell asking Bernie Sanders about that same argument put forth in a tweet by Donald Trump over here.
Point out, focus on the real issues. There has been charges of sexism back and forth between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. He used a vulgar term against her and then said it wasn't really that vulgar. Then she said that she's going to have Bill Clinton campaigning in January, and he tweeted out in the last 24 hours, Hillary Clinton has announced she is letting her husband out to campaign, but he's demonstrate a penchant for sexism, so inappropriate. Are we going to get into an argument not only of sexism between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, but Donald Trump attacking Bill Clinton?
Well, I tell you what, we're going to let my wife Jane out, and I think Hillary is going to be in real trouble. But look, the real issues are not Donald Trump's vulgarity, and he is vulgar. It is the fact that Donald Trump thinks we should not be raising the minimum wage. He believes that wages in America are too high. This guy wants to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 0.3%. And meanwhile, what he wants to do is divide our country between Latinos and Americans and between Muslims and everybody else. That's not the kind of America we need. Andrea, what we have got to do is ask the hard questions, and that is, why is it that the people on top are doing phenomenally well while almost everybody else is seeing a decline in their real incomes? Why is it that we're not effectively addressing the fact that climate change is absolutely real? I am in Burlington, Vermont right now. Nobody can recall a Christmas Eve, the likes of which we have seen, where the temperature was 65 degrees. And what the scientists are telling us, if we don't get our act together, we're going to be leaving a planet to our kids and grandchildren which is not going to be in good shape. And yet Donald Trump, among others, denies even the reality of climate change, let alone doing something about it. So we got some really important issues to discuss in this campaign, and I intend to do just that.
While these
So I thought Bernie Sanders in that interview and in most interviews, he does a good job of always switching back to middle-class issues, the middle-class economic issues, whatever he's asked about. And I thought he did a good job in response to that question, where he also took on Donald Trump a little bit. And excuse me, the next clip I want to show is actually someone unexpected commenting, or not really commenting on Donald Trump, avoiding commenting on Donald Trump, but talking about the issues of national security and civil liberties. It's Justice of the Supreme Court Stephen Breyer, who was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to, it was Jonathan Karl, right? Let me make sure I have this. Oh, and by the way, this is where I just skipped over the clip number 7. If you're watching this clip list, I made a mistake in the ordering, and that's really supposed to be a transitional clip, and I'll get to that right before clip 15. But this is Stephen Breyer first talking about the balance between civil liberties and national security, and how the court basically got it wrong with Japanese internment. And then Jonathan Karl tries to get him to comment on Donald Trump's policies of, banning Muslims and citing the Japanese internment as like a positive support for his position. But of course, Stephen Breyer doesn't take the bait, but gives kind of an interesting answer over in this clip.
Issues Breyer and the court have wrestled with is finding a balance between national security and civil liberties.
Cicero, 2,000 years ago, more. In time of war, the laws fall silent. Now, that was the court's attitude for a long time. And that led, in World War II, to 70,000 American citizens of Japanese origin being removed from their homes and put in camps, and this court in 1944 upholding that without any evidence whatsoever. They upheld it because they're thinking, well, we can't run the war, so Roosevelt has to.
And this is a case you've written about extensively. Do you think it could happen again in the United States?
That they put 70,000 Americans? I doubt it.
Why?
Why? Why do you doubt it? This country has developed stronger traditions of civil liberties.
So what do you think when you hear Donald Trump come out and say that, proposed a ban on one religious group coming into the United States?
What do I think when I hear that? I think every person in the United States has a right to an opinion on that which he can express publicly except for me.
You have no opinion?
A judge has to do his best not to have an opinion on a political matter, like that one is highly political. And if I have an opinion, I might talk to my wife about it, but I'm not going to talk.
If you talk to your wife about that one?
Do I talk? I'm not even going to answer the question of whether I talk to my wife about it. And that isn't because there isn't an answer.
Well, just one more on this. It's interesting. Trump, in making the case for his ban on Muslims coming into the country, cites FDR's internment of the Japanese. What do you make of that?
That's his affair.
Appointed by Bill Clinton.
So you can see Justice Stephen Breyer, as one of the top lawyers in the country, is not going to get questioned into answering something he doesn't want to answer on a political topic. But I think from his initial answer about the Korematsu case and Japanese internment, you can get the idea that he probably wouldn't be too keen on what Donald Trump is proposing if that proposal came before him as a member of the Supreme Court. But you can draw your own conclusion. Let me know what you think. I do want to show one more Stephen clip, not Stephen Breyer, but Stephen Colbert. This is another comment on Donald Trump where he also says something kind of nice about Donald Trump, or at least positive about Donald Trump, knowing that he has to appeal to voters. But then he also says that he thinks that the appeal of Donald Trump isn't really what, the divisive appeal of Donald Trump, or Donald Trump's divisiveness isn't really what voters want. And that's one of the reasons he actually quit his old show on Comedy Central. And I've heard him say something like this before, but I thought it was interesting, and you can watch it over in this clip from talking to John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
The fact is that he knows that it is an emotional appeal, and it might be emotional appeals that I can't respect, but he knows that you have to appeal to the voter. And that's why I may be wrong. I made a big deal about there's no way he's going to win.
You weren't the only one.
Yeah. Again, I don't know anything about politics.
Yeah, but you do know about the country. You have a sense of where the country is. You have a sense, and I wonder how you get that now. I mean,
that's one of the reasons I stopped the old show, is that I had a sense where the country is. I think people, I think people don't really want constant divisiveness. I really don't think they want that, and that's what I was aping. And I thought, I can't drink that cup anymore, because I don't think people really want to hear it.
We'll have a lot more of our...
I don't know. That is a little bit... makes me a little bit sad to think that that's why Stephen Colbert decided not to continue his Comedy Central show. I don't think that is really true. I don't think divisiveness has run its course in American politics. I think the success of Donald Trump has really shown that. And I actually, having watched all of Stephen Colbert's new late show programs on CBS, I don't really enjoy them as much as I enjoyed the old Colbert Report. There are parts that I like, but I don't think his show is either as good as his old show or as good as David Letterman's late show, which I also was a big fan of. So anyway, in some ways I wish he was still doing the Colbert Report during, especially, it would be also great to have Jon Stewart back on The Daily Show, because I don't think that Trevor Noah's doing as good a job as Jon Stewart would have done, and so there's kind of a big hole there that that answer to the Face the Nation interview question from John Dickerson made me think about. I kind of miss Stephen Colbert as the character Stephen Colbert over on Comedy Central, and I miss Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. But I want to move on to some of the other candidates besides Donald Trump. I have a few clips from other candidates, and before I get to that, I want to do one more general report. This is from Jake Tapper over on State of the Union. It's the very beginning of the show where he always says, what is the State of the Union? And the State of the Union today is deciding, I guess because we're about a month away from the Iowa caucus, February 1st, and then February 9th is the New Hampshire primary. And it talks about Trump on top, but Cruz doing well in Iowa, and Kasich and Christie have a chance in New Hampshire, and the question of Trump versus the establishment, all covered over in this CNN clip from this morning here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is deciding. As we ring in the new year, the candidates are fighting through the cold, or maybe just moderately chilly winter months in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, looking for support. And voters are paying attention, getting ready to make their final choices before heading to the polls. So far, Donald Trump still on top. His lead across the country is strong. But in the early states, we're beginning to see a little change, a little sign of vulnerability. In Iowa, Ted Cruz is trading leads with Trump in some polls. Cruz is receiving praise for his ground game in Iowa, which could make the difference on caucus night there. And in first in the nation primary state New Hampshire, Chris Christie slowly making gains in a state known for picking moderates and more independent candidates as their nominees. But Trump still on top in the Granite State. So what does this all mean? Do the old rules still apply to the Trump campaign? Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm at 42 and you're at 3.
So far, the Republican race has been contentious.
Donald Trump is a jerk.
It's been adventurous. 2, 3. But above all, it's been unpredictable.
That's the first thing I'm going to do as president. We're going to drink more.
Now that the first votes are about to be cast, the roller coaster ride could really get going.
If we win Iowa, I think we're going to win everything after that.
That, of course, is a big if. Some polls show Trump leading in Iowa, while others give the lead to his nearest rival, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a Tea Party favorite whose message also resonates with Iowa's religious conservatives.
God bless the great state of Iowa.
Trump's challenge is to mobilize his supporters, some of whom have never participated in Iowa's complicated caucus process. Leading the charge on the ground in the Hawkeye State is his Iowa co-chair, once a contestant on The Apprentice.
You're fired.
Whoever wins Iowa will head into New Hampshire with momentum. But the real question there is, who may emerge as the alternative to Trump? He leads by a wide margin there, too, but clustered behind him are 4 establishment candidates. Marco Rubio.
We should be very realistic about the problems America faces.
Chris Christie.
As governor of New Jersey, what I did.
John Kasich.
What we do in Ohio can be applied nationally.
And Jeb Bush.
I honestly believe I'm going to win New Hampshire.
Push, push, push.
Kasich has acknowledged that the Granite State is a must-win state for him, telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, "If I get destroyed in New Hampshire, then that's the end of the game."
All right, all right.
Chris Christie snagged the coveted endorsement of the New Hampshire Union leader, and he or Marco Rubio seem most likely to benefit if the field of establishment candidates winnows, clearing a path for one to emerge to battle the Iowa winner. From there, the battle heads to South Carolina, which has picked the winner almost every time since the 1980s.
It's great to be back in South Carolina, a place that believed in me.
Rubio has deep ties here. His super PAC is headquartered in the capital, and his staff stocked with natives.
The first 3 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, are critical. But the RNC has sped up this process. Immediately thereafter, you're going to have Nevada, and then you're going to pop into Super Tuesday within just a couple of weeks.
That's when Ted Cruz plans to go full throttle for a series of contests dubbed the SEC primary. named after the college football conference. Cruz has been campaigning in places such as Alabama since this summer, where he laid out his Southern strategy.
States like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are conservative states. They're evangelical states. They're states where our grassroots team is incredibly strong. And I view the SEC primary as a firewall.
Maybe, just maybe by then, we'll be a little closer to knowing where this crazy ride will end up.
So who will take the top?
So I thought that was a pretty good summary of where the Republican race is right now and who the contenders are in various aspects of the upcoming, both Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and it could be that there are three different winners in those first three important Republican contests, and I don't think this next candidate I'm going to show is going to win any of those. For a while it looked like he might win Iowa, but I think he's pretty much peaked, and I wasn't sure whether to show any clip of Dr. Ben Carson, who I'm talking about here. He was over on Face the Nation talking to John Dickerson, and John Dickerson asked him, looking back on the year, do you have any regrets? And I think Ben Carson did a pretty good job of describing all the things that have led to his campaign faltering in the last few months, which I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
At 2015, any attacks that you let go by that you'd like to correct here from the last year?
Oh, there are a lot of attacks. The attacks that, I really didn't have a temper. I guess that's kind of flattering. They said you couldn't possibly have been like that. And then when the articles were found with interviews from my mother and other people, nobody came back and said, oh, we found the evidence. With the West Point story, nobody indicated that, in fact, Westmoreland was there in February for a Congressional Medal of Honor dinner, which is what I said. There was a question about the dates, but no one comes back and corrects any of that. Virtually everything that was said, no one comes back and says none of that stuff is true. And I just think we have to probably be the ones who forcefully inject that into the narrative. But also, the narrative that I don't know anything about foreign policy. If you go back and you look at the things that I've been saying about foreign policy over the last year, you'll see that they're the very things that everybody else is talking about now. And right now, I'm talking about the fact that we cannot be distracted by Iraq and Syria only. We need to recognize what's going on in Libya. Libya represents an incredible caliphate for them. It has a lot of oil, and you go north across the water, you're into southern Europe. You go south, you're into Chad and Sudan, Niger,
One of the points you're making, Dr. Carson, is that you've said...
I don't know. I think he kind of contradicted his own point on foreign policy, the way he was sort of drifting off there at the end, and he did a pretty good job summarizing the attacks on the factual accuracy of his own life story that kind of came out, and he says that they countered some of that, and some of it, they found support for some of what he said, but he apparently has been going around to all these Christian evangelicals for many years, talking about the way he was saved by God and all these miraculous stories where some of the details were kind of exaggerated. I looked into one of them on one of my clip roundups several weeks ago about the Yale story, which I was interested in because that's where I got my undergraduate degree, and I really don't think he told the truth. There were, even though he found some support, that there was some like hoax from a humor magazine that partially supported his story. It like left out the whole part that it was a hoax from a humor magazine. It was like he fell for a story from The Onion and somehow saw that as like his miraculous honesty. But anyway, I didn't want to go into all that, but I do want to show a clip of one of the other candidates who may have a little bit of a chance. This is Ohio Governor John Kasich explaining how he may spark out of New Hampshire. It's kind of a low probability, but not totally impossible. He was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Jonathan Karl here.
40-plus town hall meetings in New Hampshire that you've done. Do you have to win the New Hampshire primary?
I have to do well enough there, John, so that I'm the story coming out of New Hampshire, and I think I will be. And I will tell you, if I come out of New Hampshire, people are finally, and everywhere I go, people say that you need more time on a debate stage. People need to hear you. I come out of New Hampshire, and as you know, you've known me for a long time, I'll catch fire, and if I catch fire, I think the sky's the limit. And, you know, but you have to work at it. 45 town hall meetings, and I'm hoping to get to 100, even if I have to do town hall meetings after the primary.
Now, it looks like Fox Business is...
So I suppose it's possible that Governor John Kasich could pull an upset in New Hampshire so that he became the story out of New Hampshire. The same's true for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Also, Marco Rubio could do well there, or in South Carolina. He could be the winner in either of those two states, as you saw from some of those previous reports. And I suppose there's even an outside chance that Jeb Bush could do well in New Hampshire, but that is a really, really outside chance. But there may be somebody who's going to fill that void, the anti-Trump void, in addition to Ted Cruz, who may actually win Iowa. But the person who's won Iowa before but will probably drop out after the February 1st Iowa caucus because he didn't win or didn't do really well is former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who was over on Fox News Sunday this morning talking to Doug McKelway, the guest host, who basically almost was actually asked him in the question if he's going to announce he's dropping out today, after pointing out he has to drop out if he doesn't win or do really well in Iowa over in this clip.
Politics. Just a little more than a month now to the first in the nation voting in Iowa. Just 8 years ago, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee won the GOP caucuses there. But it's a different story this time around. Huckabee is currently polling 8th in the state at only 2.3%, according to the latest Real Clear Politics average. And this week, he said he will likely end his campaign if he does not finish in the top 3. Governor Huckabee joins me now from Little Rock, Arkansas. Governor, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Todd. Great to be back with you.
Let me ask you, it's incumbent upon me to ask you right off the bat, you got any announcement to make right now?
Of course not. Look, not one person in all of America has even voted. I get so amazed that people act like that this is all settled. It's never settled this far out. I mean, I go back to the Iowa caucuses, both Democrat and Republican. John Kerry won when he wasn't supposed to. Barack Obama won when he wasn't supposed to. I won, and nobody thought that was going to happen. Rick Santorum won. He was in 7th place, or 6th place out of 7 candidates, 5 days out from the caucuses. So everybody wants to base it on polls that have polled 200 or 300 people. Why don't we wait till the voters make the decision? Then we'll have a better picture of where this is all headed.
In Iowa, perhaps more than any.
And I think there's a little bit of truth to what Mike Huckabee said there, that when the voters actually vote, we may see some upsets, especially the Iowa caucuses, because it's not that easy to go and vote in a caucus. It's not like a regular election where you just show up at the polling place and fill out your ballot and leave. You have to like stay and move to the corner of the room for your candidate, and then they like start eliminating candidates, and you have to go to your second choice or your third choice or whatever. And so it takes like a significant period of time on a, they always say, the cliche that all the pundits say is, on those cold, snowy Iowa nights, who's really going to come out to the caucuses? And that's why the polls don't always reflect the results of the Iowa caucuses. And the next clip I want to show is more related to Mike Huckabee and to Ben Carson. I think, Mike Huckabee is one of the candidates most likely to be the next dropout. And ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, with the guest host Jonathan Karl, did a little montage of the Republican candidates who have dropped out so far. Rick Perry of Texas and Bobby Jindal from Louisiana. And then this last week, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina also dropped out. And you can see that little montage over here.
This debate, from divisive name-calling, from sound bites without solutions, and start discussing how we will make the country better.
I'm being called to lead by helping to clear the field so that the voters can focus on a limited number of candidates who can offer a positive, conservative alternative to the current frontrunner.
We spent a lot of time developing detailed policy papers, and given this crazy, unpredictable election season, clearly there just wasn't a lot of interest in those policy papers.
The future of the country will be in your hands if you're President of the United States.
This is not a game show. This is not a reality show.
GOP governors and senators left by the wayside in Donald Trump's wake, all taking a parting shot at the Republican frontrunner. We're back now with the power.
So I don't know. It seemed like Jonathan Karl was saying that all those candidates failed because of Donald Trump, and that might be true, but I'm not sure if it is true. Some of those candidates, I think, would have failed with Donald Trump in the race or not in the race. Maybe he took up so much of the so-called oxygen that that may have helped them fail faster, but that's the last clip I want to show on the Republican side of the race. So I have two clips that I consider transitional clips because they're more generally about the 2016 presidential election. The first one is the out-of-sequence clip that I mistakenly, if you're looking at your clip list, used to be number 7, but it's actually coming in here as clip number 14, and it's Andrea Mitchell talking about how foreign policy has become the focus of the campaign in general, both on the Democratic and Republican side, which is something she really harps on when in her interview with Bernie Sanders. I'm going to show another couple clips of that in a minute, and I don't know if it's the media that has caused that or if she's just reporting on it. You can let me know what you think after you watch that clip here.
America is confronting incredible challenges on a scale not seen since the days immediately after 9/11. After the Paris and San Bernardino terror attacks, which candidate should be trusted to sit in the Oval Office? It's a big question for voters in 2016. The commander-in-chief test. Which candidate will be able to handle crises around the world and terror threats here at home? In Afghanistan, America's longest war, just this past week, the worst U.S. troop losses in 3 years.
It's still dangerous, as we saw this past week. We had some outstanding, brave men and women who were killed.
In Iraq, Sunnis and Shiites struggle for power. Syria is in shambles, and ISIS is on the march from Iraq and Syria to Libya, Afghanistan, and beyond. Who can defeat the terror group? Donald Trump says, let Vladimir Putin do it.
If Russia wants to bomb them, let them bomb them.
But it's Putin, along with Iran, who has kept Syria's brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad in power.
Russia and Iran have to face the fact that continuing to prop up a vicious dictator will not bring stability. Right now, I'm afraid President Putin is actually making things somewhat worse.
Unlike Obama, Hillary Clinton has called for a no-fly zone over Syria.
One of the reasons why I have advocated for a no-fly zone is in order to create those safe refuges within Syria.
But with Putin now flying airstrikes over Syria, even she now acknowledges this is more complicated. Experts warn the U.S. could find itself in a dogfight with Russian fighter jets.
Russians flying combat missions, who have advanced Russian weapon systems. That means our ability to operate is that much less.
All this as the Syrian conflict produces a flood of refugees, overwhelming Europe and becoming an explosive campaign issue at home.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
President Obama and Hillary Clinton's proposal to bring to America tens of thousands of Syrian Muslims is nothing short of lunacy.
And now one dissenting Republican voice has been forced to drop out.
Donald Trump has done the one single thing you cannot do: declare war on Islam itself.
And I'm joined now from Palo Alto. America is...
And then NBC's Meet the Press went into this discussion between a couple expert pundits. I don't know if they're experts or pundits. One is a former ambassador to Russia who's now a professor at Stanford. And I can't remember where the other person, what her resume was, but I didn't take any clips from that. But I thought that was a fairly good summary of the way the foreign policy issue has figured into the presidential campaign, except for the fact that I'm not sure whether it really looked at the media's role in putting the focus on that issue. I mean, certainly there have been events like the attack in Paris and the attack in San Bernardino, but whether you want to focus on those events as the biggest threats and what's going on in Syria and Iraq as really big threats and play that heavily, like they do, especially on Fox News. I've seen they've been playing up the terrorism issue. It's almost 24/7 terrorism coverage. Occasionally they get to other topics, but people die from gun violence. People die from a lot of different causes that are probably more dangerous to Americans than some of the issues that Andrea Mitchell was focusing on there. So that would be my criticism. The next clip I want to show that I've classified as a transitional clip between the Republican and the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race is a report from CNN's John King, introduced by Jake Tapper, using what they call the magic wall, which I think is kind of funny. And in this, it's basically looking at a map of the U.S. and the electoral map and going through a bunch of hypotheticals about how Republicans could win, getting 4 states that they didn't get last time, and how Trump is really going to screw the Republican Party, basically, as I will discuss after you watch that clip here.
Talking about each other on the campaign trail, each saying the other cannot win a general election in November. So who's right? CNN's John King is at our magic wall to try to break down their general election prospects. John?
Well, Jake, you always start the next election by trying to learn the lessons of the last election. If you look at the map, this is Obama versus Romney. The numbers obviously not good for the Republicans. The president winning with 332 electoral votes last time. That's what Hillary Clinton wants to match. She'd like to beat it, but her main goal is to try to keep, assuming she's the Democratic nominee, to keep the Obama coalition together. Now, it looks bleak, but the Republicans can actually win the White House by not changing all that much. Watch this. Republicans will focus a lot of time on Florida. If they can change that red, the numbers start to look a little better. Republicans will spend a ton of time on Ohio. No Republicans ever won without Ohio, right? You know the cliche. If they win Florida and Ohio, suddenly they're in play. The question is, if you can do that, and that's a big if, we'll get to that in a minute, how do you go from there? The Republican playlist says Virginia should be next. They think, even though it's been trending blue, they can pull it back to the Republican side. If you do that, then you're definitely in play. Then the Republicans need one more state. If you can win Florida, Virginia, and Ohio, it takes just one more state. A lot of Republicans think that state could be Colorado. That would put the Republican over the top if only those 4 states change. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, they can't get Colorado. We'll make that one back blue. Where else could they go? Iowa is a swing state in presidential politics. If they could move Iowa, that would put the Republicans over the top. So again, with just 4 states, Republicans can do it. And I could give you several of these combinations. If not Iowa, maybe the state of New Hampshire. That would get the Republicans to victory. So it can be done with changing just 4 states. Now, so that sounds not so hard. At the same time, though, Jake, it's not so easy. Let's switch maps, and we'll get into that, because one of the reasons the Democrats have been successful in the Electoral College is because of their success with non-white voters. So just imagine, maybe it won't be him, but just imagine Donald Trump as the nominee. Can he win Florida? Can he win Virginia? Could he win Colorado? Well, that's where the problem lies, because let's go back in time and remember the history. President Obama in 2012 won re-election by getting more than 9 in 10 African-American votes and more than 7 in 10 Latino votes. He won 2/3 in 2008, 7 in 10 in 2012. Well, look at Donald Trump's numbers right now in a hypothetical matchup against Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is getting only 7% of the Latino vote, 13% of the Latino vote, and 7% of the African-American vote. There is virtually no way any Republican can win the White House with those numbers. In the Latino front, most people think the Republicans need to be up close to 40%, even at 40 or above. Double digits among African Americans to make the demographics challenging. And this is hypothetical poll matchup, but it's a serious problem for Trump. Let me give you some more numbers here. His favorability among Latinos and African Americans is in the tank. So if Trump is the nominee, he would have a lot of work to do to make the presidential election competitive on a demographic level. And even if he's not, some Republicans think all this talk during the primaries could hurt their party. And what happens if you have that? That's why you hear the establishment concerns about a Trump as the nominee, or about a Trump effect on the eventual nominee. Because if you can't win non-white voters, not only can you not win the presidency, what Republicans are worried about is a key Senate race here, 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 and maybe more could get lost if you have a Republican Party that cannot win non-white voters. So it's early. We're just looking at the hypotheticals right now, but the map is doable for the Republicans, Jake, but going to take a lot of work.
Thanks, John.
Now, I think that the end of that last report shows why, as a Democrat, if I were just looking at what is, I'm a registered Democrat. I've said that before, I think, in various videos. And as a registered Democrat, if I was just interested in what's good for the Democratic Party and what's not what's good for the country, then I would really want Donald Trump to be the nominee of the Republican Party. But I actually think that would be bad for the country if Donald Trump were the nominee. So even though it would make it easier for the Democrat to win, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't work out for Donald Trump. But although I actually think that if Donald Trump becomes the nominee, that he may pull like this big switcheroo and like go back to the more liberal Donald Trump, where he was friends with Democrats and pro-choice, and I think the only thing that will, well, I don't know, maybe even the bluster, it will like calm down and he'll seem more moderate. I think he has the ability to change his persona to fit the audience that he wants to persuade. So it could be possible that once Trump gets the Republican nomination and he expands the audience that he's trying to appeal to, that we may see a whole new Donald Trump, and that would be kind of funny in a way, and I guess it would be a little less damaging to the country. And I don't know what the base of the Republican Party, that they would like totally freak out, I guess, but hopefully that won't even happen. But I now want to move on from my transitional clip. So the next 4 clips are on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential election, and the last 3 of them are clips of Senator Bernie Sanders. Like I said, he did 2 interviews, one on NBC's Meet the Press and one over on CBS's Face the Nation. But before I get to those Bernie Sanders clips, I want to show one clip from CNN's State of the Union, which was mostly a panel discussion show, not much in terms of newsmakers. So this is just a little clip that Jake Tapper showed as he went to talk to the panel, and I'm not going to show the panel discussion, but I thought it was kind of humorous. It's a clip of Hillary Clinton in 2008 responding to her loss in Iowa, and then I thought it was kind of funny the way you'll see Jake Tapper says she gets real credit for, seeming to be human over here.
You just raised our recollection of Hillary Clinton coming in 3rd in the Iowa caucus. People forget, behind John Edwards. But she managed to turn that loss into something that appealed to Democratic voters in New Hampshire. Take a look.
This is very personal for me. It's not just political. It's not just public. I see what's happening, and we have to reverse it. And some people think elections are a game. They think it's like who's up or who's down. It's about our country. It's about our kids' futures. And it's really about all of us together.
Wow, I haven't seen that Hillary Clinton in a long time.
Right.
That was a moment where people really gave her credit for being human.
And it was a fascinating moment.
Okay, it wasn't appearing to be human, but it gave her credit for being human. Like, is that something that presidential candidates need to get credit for these days? I don't know. That seems a little weird, and that whole clip seemed a little weird. But now I want to move on to an NBC clip, Andrea Mitchell interviewing Bernie Sanders, and excuse me, I will do a little Marco Rubio after I get to the clip. While you're watching this clip of Bernie Sanders explaining why this poll that Andrea Mitchell is going to show isn't really the way they're spinning it. And this is also Andrea Mitchell putting forth this theory that you saw in that previous transitional clip, how foreign policy is dominating the campaign, and that's why Bernie Sanders isn't doing as well. And she uses this poll to make that argument, and Bernie Sanders disputes it over here.
What recent polling shows is that Americans since Paris, since Bernardino, are more concerned about terrorism, the threat of terrorism, than they are about the economy, at least according to the polling. And in fact, you had polled within 8 points of Hillary Clinton in a recent CNN poll taken before last Saturday night's debate, but the margin widened to 33 points among those polled after the Saturday night debate, which focused heavily on foreign policy. Let me just finish. Doesn't it show that you still, among people who are concerned about foreign policy, concerned about terror, you really have some ground to make up against Hillary Clinton?
You know, it's interesting the way CNN spun that poll, because you know what that poll showed?
It showed between their last poll and this current poll, we gained 12 points on Hillary Clinton. She dropped 8, we went up by 4. That is the message of the poll. Another poll came out in Rasmussen, also showing us closing the gap. In New Hampshire, some of the recent polls have us ahead, and in Iowa, we're close to catching up to her. So I think what the polls are showing is that the American people are responding to our message. Now, in terms of ISIS and in terms of foreign policy, these are, of course, huge issues. The American people are concerned about another terrorist attack, and what I have said over and over again, we must destroy ISIS, but we must do it in a way that is smart.
At the same time, the polling has shown that on foreign policy and on ISIS, that you are far, far behind Hillary Clinton. And you have said that you would somehow persuade the Saudis to stop fighting in Yemen and turn their attention to ISIS. No one else has been able to get that, to persuade the Saudis to do that. How could you, as commander-in-chief, do what other presidents have failed to do in terms of getting the Saudis to listen to what America wants for the fight against these terror groups?
Well, it's what has got to happen, and certainly the United States and the other major powers have a great deal of leverage. A, it cannot be the United States alone. B, what many people in the Middle East understand, it must be the Muslims themselves on the ground destroying ISIS. So what we need is, in fact, a coalition. Saudi Arabia, Qatar are incredibly wealthy countries, and they have got to start using some of their resources to help us destroy ISIS, rather than, in the case of Saudi Arabia, fighting in Yemen, in the case of Qatar, spending hundreds of billions of dollars in preparation for the World Cup in 2022. So what I think American leadership is about is putting together that international coalition to destroy ISIS. But let me also say this, Andrea. I know sometimes the media thinks that is the only issue. It is an enormously important issue. We have got to defend America. We have got to destroy ISIS. But right now, people are watching this program who are 55, 60 years of age. They have $0 in their retirement account. They're wondering how they're going to make it in their older age, which is why we have to expand Social Security. There are millions of young people out there desperately want to go to college, don't want to leave college deeply in debt. We have got to deal with that issue. We're the only major country on earth that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave, doesn't provide health care for all people as a right. We cannot ignore those issues. So my view is, yes, of course, we've got to focus on foreign policy. We have to destroy ISIS. But I will not stop fighting for working families and the middle class, will not stop taking on a billionaire class whose greed in many ways is destroying our economy.
Now,
So I don't know if that is really the best answer, to pivot to domestic issues. I mean, it could end up being a winning strategy depending on what the news is for the next few months and what the news media focuses on. That was the point I was making when I showed that previous clip from Andrea Mitchell about the focus on foreign policy and terrorism, and that may be a choice that the media is going to make. But I want to show another clip of Andrea Mitchell's interview with Senator Bernie Sanders. In this one, she asks him both about whether he needs to win New Hampshire, where he's leading Hillary Clinton right now, and also whether he thinks the Democratic Party is being fair to him. And he pretty much answers the first and dodges the second, I think, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
As you head into these early voting states, you have to win New Hampshire, your neighboring state. You're ahead in most polls there. Do you feel that the Democratic Party, led by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is trying to sabotage your campaign and not being an impartial arbiter going into these early fights?
Well, as you've indicated, there's no question but that both Iowa and New Hampshire are enormously important for me or for any other candidate. When I began this campaign, Andrea, we were nationally at 3-4% in the polls. We are way, way behind in Iowa, way, way behind in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, I think we may be a little bit ahead. In Iowa, we're closing the gap. So in my view, we've got a real shot to win Iowa. We've got a real shot to win New Hampshire. I am going to be spending a lot of time in the next 4 or 5 weeks in Iowa, in New Hampshire. We have a wonderful grassroots organization, a lot of volunteers who are knocking on doors. And if we can win in Iowa or New Hampshire. I think it really does open us up to a path toward victory.
Is the DNC giving you a fair shot?
Look, we have had our differences of opinion with the DNC, but at the end of the day, the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and myself, we want to defeat right-wing extremism in this country. So we're trying to work out our differences of opinion.
Well, Senator, thank you very much and a happy...
So, I don't know, that was kind of a dodge of that question about his problems with the Democratic National Committee in that end of the answer, but I think Bernie Sanders does have to win New Hampshire and maybe even Iowa if he has even a chance of winning against Hillary Clinton. Even if he wins both those, there was another Democrat who won the nomination after not winning either Iowa or New Hampshire, and that was Bill Clinton, so it's definitely possible. And then I want to show one more clip on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race. This is one more Senator Bernie Sanders clip. This is his interview over on CBS's Face the Nation, and I'll have another clip from that all the way at the end of the program when I get to the topic of race, which is actually the next topic in the next clip. But here's Bernie Sanders actually talking somewhat about Donald Trump and his theory that he can appeal to the voters that are attracted to Donald Trump by really talking about economic issues in a real way, while Donald Trump is trying to blame their economic problems on, immigrants and Muslims and whatever, which is a pretty good theory, and I think he argues it pretty well on Face the Nation this morning in this clip.
This year, as we look back, you and Donald Trump are the big surprise political stories. You've suggested recently that your message about the economic inequality can appeal to the Trump voters. Explain how that happens.
Look, many of Trump's supporters are working class people, and they are angry. And they're angry because they're working longer hours for lower wages. They're angry because their jobs have left this country and gone to China or other low-wage countries. They're angry because they can't afford to send their kids to college, or they can't retire with dignity. And I think what Trump has done successfully, I would say, is take that anger, take that anxiety about terrorism, and say to a lot of people in this country, look, the reason for our problems is because of Mexicans. And he says they're all criminals and rapists. We got to hate Mexicans. Or he says about the Muslims, they're all terrorists, and we got to keep them out of this country. That's what we have to deal with to make America great. Meanwhile, interestingly enough, John, this is a guy who does not want to raise the minimum wage. In fact, he has said that he thinks wages in America are too high. But he does want to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 0.3%. So I think for his working class and middle class support, I think we can make the case that if we really want to address the issues that people are concerned about, why the middle class is disappearing, massive income and wealth inequality in this country, that we need policies that bring us together, that take on the greed of Wall Street, the greed of corporate America, and create a middle class that works for all of us rather than an economy that works just for a few.
But, Senator, essentially you're saying that people should be concerned about what you're talking about, not what Donald Trump is talking about.
Well, not really, John. I mean, everybody is concerned about the disappearing middle class, the fact that we have 47 million people living in poverty, that we're the only major country on earth that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave or guarantee health care to all people. People are very worried about how they're going to retire with dignity. And that's why I believe we need to expand Social Security benefits. Those are the issues that are on most working people's minds. And what I'm suggesting is that what Trump has done with some success is taken that anger, taken those fears, which are legitimate, and converted them to be into anger against Mexicans, anger against Muslims. And in my view, that is not the way we're going to address the major problems facing our country. The way we address them was we bring our people together. We demand that Congress passes legislation which creates millions of decent paying jobs, raises the minimum wage, pay equity for women, making college affordable for all. And those are the ways, I think, that we improve lives for our people, not by dividing us up and having us hate Mexicans or Muslims.
Let me
So I like that answer a lot, and you notice there are a lot of the same middle-class economic issue talking points that he used to respond to the foreign policy issue, but I think they're a lot more applicable when responding to the appeal of Donald Trump and the way he's scapegoating Muslims or immigrants or whatever. And it would be better if Bernie Sanders were willing to take the foreign policy issues on, just as they are, or maybe he could accuse the media of focusing too much on foreign policy issues if that's what he wants to do. But I don't think just transitioning over to the economic issues without saying something more about foreign policy, better about foreign policy than what he did. I don't know. That's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. That's the last clip I want to show on the topic of the presidential race at all, although I do have, like I said, one more Bernie Sanders clip at the end on the Black Lives Matter movement, because so the next topic is sort of a general topic of race and police officers, and I've discussed this over and over again. It's why I have this book right here, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and Matt Taibbi's book, The Divide, both about the criminal justice system. This more about how it's racist, this more about how it's classist, and I've talked a lot about Black Lives Matter and the racism in the criminal justice system because I have a background as a criminal defense attorney, so it's something that interests me, and I am glad that a lot of these shootings by police of unarmed black people is getting national media attention, especially because of video, but also because of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was unfortunate earlier, several weeks back, when the issue of this Chicago shooting from a year ago came back up, and the video came out of another unarmed black man getting shot by police in Chicago as he was actually going away from them. That came out right before the San Bernardino shooting, and so it wasn't covered on any of the programs where I take my clips from, and I never really covered it. Well, this last weekend there was a shooting in Chicago where an innocent woman was killed, and a mentally ill 19-year-old college student was shot 7 times by police in what some people think might be excessive force. And the first clip I want to show is the most recent clip of all the clips, in time, I mean. It's the latest report I could find. It's from CNN's Newsroom, and it has most of the facts, and I cut it off before they talked about the mental illness aspect, but that was actually covered on CNN as well. The subsequent clips I'm going to show from NBC and MSNBC leave out way too many facts, but they're almost all in this general clip about what happened in Chicago this weekend, which I will discuss after you watch it here.
I stand here because I love my nephew. But I also stand for the other young teenagers that have got shot down in the streets like dogs.
And that is the aunt of a 19-year-old man shot and killed by Chicago police. It's putting the department under scrutiny once again. Police say that an officer fatally wounded 19-year-old Quintonio LeGrier and 55-year-old Bettie Jones, a mother of 5, while they were responding to a domestic disturbance call involving the 19-year-old. The Chicago PD now says Jones, her death was a tragic accident. Her childhood friends spoke out this afternoon in anger.
It hurts me all over to know that the family's going through this tragic danger thing that's going on. Police shooting without asking. Why you got to shoot first and ask questions later? It's ridiculous. Somebody needs to do something about this. This is ridiculous. What about the taser? Taser him down. Don't start shooting people, innocent people.
And our Ryan Young joins me now from Chicago, outside the house where the 2 victims lived and were killed. Ryan, tell me about the crowd. Tell me about the mood.
Well, Deborah, we've been doing this for about an hour and a half now, and you really feel the pain of people who are in this area. They're upset about this, and they want to know what happened. They want to know why the officers had to open fire. If you look behind me, you can see the crowd now has kind of going down in size because some people started marching off. Some people were doing and chanting a little earlier. But if I'm going to walk you this way, you can see some of the family members actually who are on this porch, who are standing here. They just addressed the crowd a few minutes ago. They were saying they were very upset. They wanted to know from police why this happened and why did they have to shoot first, like you heard in that soundbite. People want to know why a taser couldn't be used in this situation. If you look on that same area right there, the green dot that's right there above the ledge, that's one of the evidence markers where you can see where the bullet went through the door. This family actually stood in front of the door and said, hey, this is where the bullets came through the door and killed a mother of 5 and a grandmother. Of course, police were responding to a 19-year-old who had a bat in his hand, and his father had called 911 asking for help. When police arrived, apparently he fired several shots into this area. The family is saying that 19-year-old was hit 7 times. They want to know why he was shot so many times if he had a bat in his hand. Did anyone try to talk him down? Did anyone try to stop anything before the shooting started? Obviously, this community is already upset, and they already don't trust police, so you have a lot of questions being asked. And, of course, we talked to some people from family members earlier who were just beyond belief in terms of upset about what's going on in the city.
My son was a good child. He was a child that wanted things. He always said, Mama had millions. Because you know what, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to study hard. And he was an honor student. 7 times my son was shot, and 1 in the buttocks. That showed that he was turning away. He was turning away. But I got to turn today for him, and I have to be there. This needs to stop. No mother should have to bury her child.
So, yeah, very sad story, very common, unfortunately, especially in Chicago. There's a lot of gun deaths in Chicago, both by police and by just gang violence and other types of shootings. That was actually the topic of the major part of this next clip I'm going to show. It was an interview that Chuck Todd did with Spike Lee before this latest shooting in Chicago. And Chuck Todd actually got Spike Lee to use this same talking point I hear on Fox News all the time about, you know, their response to Black Lives Matter is, well, why don't they care about all the black-on-black crime? And Spike Lee actually says, yeah, we should care about the black-on-black crime, although he doesn't say just the black-on-black crime. And in a clip I'm not going to show later in the interview, he actually said a lot of really positive things about the Black Lives Matter movement. So I don't think he's using it in the way Fox News uses it. But I also want to point out that the introduction to the Chuck Todd Spike Lee clip is from Andrea Mitchell, where she talks about gun violence and she mentions the shooting in Chicago on Saturday morning, but it's reported pretty much the way these shootings would have been reported before Black Lives Matter, before the sort of rise in consciousness that has got the media to report on these things a little better, I thought. But you'll see they just say there's a shooting. They don't even mention that someone was shot accidentally, that there was this innocent bystander shot, and they don't talk about the mentally ill person who didn't really need to be shot, might have been excessive force. None of that is in the really brief mention of that issue in the introduction from Andrea Mitchell on Meet the Press, going to the discussion between Chuck Todd and Spike Lee about gun violence and Spike Lee's latest movie about the gun violence in Chicago in this clip.
Spike Lee's new movie, Chirac, has been called everything from a collage of provocation and fury to a shattering, thunderous wake-up alarm. The warning bell he is trying to ring is one about guns in America. And while the Pew Research Center says gun violence has declined since the 1990s, the backdrop to the senseless violence depicted in Lee's film is the city of Chicago, where, according to the Chicago Tribune, there have been almost 3,000 shooting victims this year alone, including a police shooting that left 2 people dead early Saturday morning. But it's not just police shootings that Spike Lee wanted to draw attention to when he sat down with Chuck to talk about his movie.
Who's the audience for this movie?
Everybody.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
I say everybody. You know why?
Why?
Because I get asked many times. I've been making films since 1986, and when you do press for the film, the one question the filmmakers always can get: what is the takeaway? What do you want people thinking come out of the theater? Usually I say I'm not answering that question.
You just took one of my questions.
Usually I don't answer that question. But I'm jettisoning for this film. I want people to think about guns. That's the takeaway for this film. 88 Americans die every day due to gun violence. That adds up to 32,000 per year. And that is not just the hood, it's not just Chirac, it's not just Philadelphia or Baltimore, Maryland, or where I'm from, Bucktown, Brooklyn, New York, or the Bronx, or the South Side, South Central LA. It affects rural areas, it affects everybody.
It seems though you're trying to send a message to Black America with this movie. This is not,
I
no?
disagree. I
Okay.
disagree. I think that guns, what I just said, guns affect everybody, and not just in the hood.
But you seem to be sending the message that it's going to take Black Americans to stop this. Don't rely on, this is not about public policy, it's not about that. It seems as if, take control of this.
Well, I wouldn't go far to say that, but I do think that I wanted to speak in this film upon black violence, that it's not always policemen. You know, it wasn't a cop that executed Tyshawn Lee, the 9-year-old boy who was lured into the alleyway in Chicago, South Side. So I think that, to me, the complexion, the color of the trigger figure does not matter to me. If you kill somebody, you kill somebody, no matter who you are.
When you make a movie,
And that's a good point. If it's not used to excuse police violence, and I think police violence is actually a worse transgression, because you expect the criminals to be violent. You don't expect the people who are supposed to enforce the law to act like criminals, and that's why I think it's not a good response like they do it on Fox News to say, well, what about black-on-black crime when you talk about the police killing of unarmed black people? And like I said, I also criticized the beginning of that clip, the introduction from Andrea Mitchell, because it really gave none of the details. And you may say, oh, well, it was kind of an add-on, they didn't have time to put it in. Well, I looked on MSNBC to see if they had a better report, and granted, this isn't quite as recent as the CNN report I started with that had all the details, but this report where they're showing that the police are admitting it wasn't one of the dead people is an accidental, and you know they stress the accidental death part of it, where some of the written press reports I've seen say that witnesses say that she was like purposely shot in the throat, or I don't know exactly. There's going to be an investigation, so I don't know what the facts are of this, but you'll see this MSNBC report also leaves out the mental illness aspect and the person with the baseball bat being killed with 7 shots, which could be excessive force. So even the later MSNBC story you see here, it's Weekends with Alex Witt. This is Alex Witt reporting in this clip.
The police say a 55-year-old woman fatally shot by one or more officers was, quote, accidentally struck. Authorities confirm 19-year-old Quintonio LeGrier and Bettie Jones were killed when officers responded to a domestic disturbance call. Investigators say LeGrier, an engineering student at Northern Illinois University, was allegedly attacking his father with a metal baseball bat. They say Jones, who's a neighbor, called 911 and was in that apartment waiting for the police. They say the officers were confronted by a combative individual upon their arrival, resulting in an officer opening fire, while the victim's family say they are shocked.
Why'd you shoot an innocent person? She ain't have no weapon. You shouldn't have drawn your weapon from your side, period.
The statement says the officer or officers involved will be placed on routine administrative duties for 30 days as a result of the shooting. And here in California...
I'm not sure that the woman they showed there was as representative as the clips I showed earlier on the CNN report. And I also noticed in that the MSNBC report, they, from all the reports I've read, got it wrong when they said that the accidental shooting victim, Bettie Jones, called in the 911 report of the domestic violence. It was actually, or domestic disturbance. was actually the father who was being menaced by his mentally ill son with a baseball bat, who called in. And officers should have training. This is something they went into in the CNN reporter, that the host of the CNN newsroom there, Deborah Feyerick, who was in for the regular host, she mentioned at the end of that report that I didn't show that, officers should really have training on how to deal with mentally ill people without, just drawing their weapons and shooting them. That's the real problem here. And speaking of people who were mistreated by police, although also may have had some other problem that resulted in their lethal police encounter. That's almost a tongue twister. Here's a final clip of the broadcast. Also on the issue of race, it's John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation asking Senator Bernie Sanders about what he said about the death of Sandra Bland in Texas, a African-American woman who died in custody, apparently from a suicide, after being really abused in both verbally and somewhat physically by this officer who arrested her, and also needed much better training. And Bernie Sanders said it wouldn't have happened if she was a middle-class white woman, which John Dickerson asked him about. And it shows Senator Bernie Sanders has gotten really good with his Black Lives Matter talking points. You can see that displayed in the final clip for the broadcast tonight here.
The issue of Sandra Bland, the grand jury in Texas decided that no felony was committed by the sheriff's office or jailers in connection with her death. And you said afterward, quote, "There's no doubt in my mind that she, like too many African Americans who die in police custody, would be alive today if she were a white woman." What did you mean?
I saw that tape, John. I don't know if you did, but I saw the way the police officer behaved toward her. It is my very strong inclination that if she was a white middle-class woman, that would not have happened. But it's not just in Texas. I mean, what we have seen is far too many people, often African Americans, who are unarmed, getting shot and killed by police officers. We need, in my view, very significant criminal justice reform. We need to make sure that lethal force. Now, being a cop is a very difficult job, and I was a mayor for 8 years. I work with police officers. Most of them do a really good job. But we need to be clear that lethal force, killing people, should be a last option, not a first option.
But, Senator, I'm sorry.
We need to make...
To interrupt, I apologize, but in this case, there was no lethal force used against her. You're not saying that her death was committed by the officers in this case, are you?
No, of course not. But she was yanked out of that car, thrown to the ground, confronted by the police officer. She responded, and she ended up in jail, and 3 days later, she was dead. The way she was yanked out of that car and the way she was treated by that police officer is not something that I think would have happened to the average middle-class white woman.
Right. Okay.
So another good answer from Senator Bernie Sanders, and a lot of what he said I think also applies to this latest incident about the use of force by police officers, and especially on people of color. So that's another issue that's, I'm sure, going to continue into 2016. I will have one more broadcast before the end of... No, I will not have one more broadcast. My next broadcast will be at the beginning of 2016, and right after New Year's. So Happy New Year's to everyone. If you may have noticed that the broadcast, the video from last week, was mostly not monetized. About 80% of the 10,000 views it got did not get monetized because of a copyright claim from Univision for the ABC clips. I don't know if that's because ABC and Univision work together on Fusion or what that's all about, but anyway, it's still pending resolution. So if you want to help me out so I don't have to... That's like the third of the almost every other broadcast seems to not get monetized. So if you want to help me out, become one of my patrons through the link down in the video description, or you can give me a direct donation through YouTube fan funding by clicking on, hovering your mouse right in this corner and clicking on that little eye. That'll go to fan funding if you live in one of the 4 countries where it actually works. Or I also appreciate those of you who support by showing up for the live show. Even for the early broadcast I did today to get to a family dinner later tonight, I appreciate 170 people about showed up, and I've been reading your comments, and I think I've saved them all for posting over on my public Patreon page where I post the live comments. And I will be back probably around the regular time at the beginning of 2016, next Sunday, around 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific time. That's Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours. Hopefully I'll have at least one other video up during the week. You can look for that, whether or not I do that. I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out from the corporate media this week. I hope it left you a little bit more informed about the topics the corporate media think are important. And I will be back next week. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.